Well, here we are, our final module, module number 5, and I am so excited. Okay, you have learned to parrot. You have learned to paraphrase. I think you already knew how, but you began doing it more intentionally and you began to practice and began to watch for the emotional response and try to reflect that back. In the section that remains, this last module, we are going to see the skill I am trying to teach you actually being used, and we are going to arm ourselves with knowledge about the most common mistakes that we tend to make. I call them autobiographical responses. I call them mistakes only in the sense of your timing might be off. There might be a good time to do this, but if your timing is off, then it becomes a mistake. So if you hear the word mistake, bear in mind I'm using it in this very specific context of this training. Many of these things that we talk about are not mistakes when they are done at the right time. And also, sometimes it's not a case of one response is 100% bad and one's 100% good. It's just a matter of which is going to be more effective in that particular situation. So with those clarifications, let's move on. But these autobiographical responses are called that because every single one of them comes out of our own past history, our own perspectives, even our own values. And our values are a result, again, of our autobiography, our past history. And so that's why they're called that. And they are definitely barriers to listening. They are definitely not the reflective response that I'm teaching you. They sometimes are very valuable, very useful. It depends on which one we're talking about. Some of them you should probably always avoid, and you'll see as we go through this list. So the first one is telling our story. This can be a mistake when it's not the right time. So if someone starts to express to you how they're feeling and you immediately jump to talking about yourself and your own story, then chances are that will be not the best choice. It could even offend the person. They may think, oh, there you go again, always talking about yourself. Is that all you can do? I just really wanted somebody to listen to me. And you've probably all had that experience where people did that to you. And it can be frustrating or even hurtful. So for example, if you've had knee surgery and you want to tell somebody about your horrendous experience recuperating from your knee surgery, you don't want them to immediately go on and on and on about their knee surgery. You want them to first hear and understand how you felt and what your experience was. So telling our story can be a mistake in some of these situations. However, there are times when you will want to tell your story, your personal experience, and it'll be very useful to the person. So again, it's often a matter of timing, okay? You've got to keep that in mind. The next one that is not what we want to be doing if we are in the stage of doing our reflective response is giving advice. Again, giving advice could be a very useful and important thing that you need to do. If you're a boss, if you are a helper of any kind, whether you're paid to do that or whether you're just doing it out of the kindness of your heart, offering some advice can be a wonderful, generous thing. It's just that in the context of this skill, it's not what we want to be doing. And again, it may be a matter of timing, and you will see that in the videos that are coming up. Advice is given eventually, but not until the time is right. Third problem is evaluating. Agreeing, disagreeing, sort of expressing some judgment, approval, disapproval. Is this a good idea, bad idea? Anything that amounts to judging or evaluating. Again, there may be a perfect time for that, but when you are trying to help the person feel heard and understood, this is not what you want to do. Hold on to that for later. Probing. Many of us are trained or educated to be really good at asking probing questions because we are good problem solvers and we have analytical minds, and we can come up with these questions that will just really help us get to the heart of the problem. And that's very useful, very valuable. It's a wonderful ability to have. But again, it's often a matter of timing. And if you want to make the person feel heard and understood, the probing question needs to wait. Oh, psychoanalyzing. Sometimes I can get into this a little bit, although I really am getting away from that tendency, I'm happy to say. But we need to be careful about starting to figure people out. And sometimes it's the result of our probing questions. So we've asked our probing questions, and then we come up with our psychoanalytical theories. Oh, maybe you're doing this because such and such happened to you as a child, or maybe you're doing this because you have some deep-rooted insecurity or whatever. You get the idea. You can tell it's going to be off-putting. So watch out for that one. And then the last one is any kind of manipulation. That includes guilt trips and other kinds of manipulation. And you'll see some guilt trips as we go through. I think we're going to now move on to what I consider my favorite part of the workshop or tutorial. This is a video showing a supervisor and an employee, and I need to set it up for you. The employee was supposed to have gotten permission from managers, or I guess you could call it buy-in, to proceed with a project involving computers, databases, etc. And she needed to give a presentation to these other managers, and then everyone would be all in agreement, and then they would be moving forward with this project. And she has dropped the ball. You will see two versions of the video. In the first version, the supervisor uses every single one of these autobiographical responses, and things don't go very well. And we never find out what is this employee's problem. But in the second video, the supervisor begins to use the reflective response, and you will see beautiful examples of the reflective response. And that's where I say it just really comes to life right in front of your eyes. So as you watch this video, we'll see the one where things go horrible first, and then we'll see things going much better. As you watch the video, I want you to watch for these autobiographical responses. See if you can identify them when you hear them. I also want you to watch for some annoying habits of the employee. What you will notice is that she tends to throw up an excuse, and then when the supervisor tries to move in to solve that particular point, then she kind of skitters away and dismisses it and says, well, that's not important, and then she moves on to the next excuse. I call it the dodge. So I want you to watch for that as well. I think that gives you enough of a setup so that we can get into this.
Yes. Hi, Laura. Come on in.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, I wanted to check with you about the status of the database project. It was my understanding that you were going to give the presentation in late March, and we needed to get the other manager's approval so that we could get rolling on this April 1st. And here we are, it's April 6th.
Yes, I know. Well, I'm really having some doubts about the direction of this project. I'm thinking maybe we need to examine that a little further.
Well, what do you mean you're having doubts about the project? 2 months ago, you were completely on board with this. Why didn't you bring it up then, and why haven't you brought it up since then?
Here's a dodge.
Well, I guess my concerns really aren't that significant. Things would have gone a lot smoother if John would have gotten me the data from his department.
Excuse
He
number
kind of slowed me
two.
down.
Laura, if you've got problems like that, you need to come and bring them to me. When I was in your position, if somebody refused to cooperate with me, I wasted no time in getting my supervisor involved.
Well,
Here's a dodge.
it's really not that big of a deal. And actually now I'm waiting on Ann to check everyone's schedule so we can pick a date.
Laura, what exactly did you say to Ann? I checked with her before I brought you in here. She said she's waiting on you for the list of attendees.
Well, obviously, there's been some confusion.
Laura, I don't understand what's going on here, but I am really disappointed by this. First, you tell me you've got doubts about the project. Then you throw John under the bus, and now you're putting all of this on to Anne. The date we established in your goals is past, and this is going to have a negative impact on your performance rating. And after everything I did for you to get you this position. Now, I've noticed at times you seemed a little nervous. Do you think anxiety could have something to do with this?
Well, actually,
Look, we're all stressed. Your performance here is just not looking good. You need to get this presentation scheduled. I expect you to buckle down and get moving on it. You got me?
Fine.
Okay. I'm going to share with you some comments that I've heard from various people as I've given this workshop in person. One interesting one was from a vice president of a company, and he said, if somebody walked out of the office like that, they'd be gone. I can really appreciate a company's refusal to put up with poor performers. On the other hand, I would ask that you consider what is the cost to the company of having to go through a firing process and then a rehiring and retraining process. Many of us are feeling that we would love to be able to avoid that process as much as possible because it's expensive, it's disruptive, it's time consuming, it sets projects back. So if we can find a better way, let's use it. That leads me to a related remark in a different group. The owner of a company said, I just want to fire that girl. But when video 2 came through and we saw the supervisor doing things correctly according to this skill we're teaching, and also found out what the problem was, she had a whole different attitude. So those are 2 comments I want to share with you in response to this first video. So let's go through and do an analysis of the kinds of quote mistakes. And again, I'm using that term loosely because it's often only a mistake because of the timing or because of the tone of voice. But let's go ahead and watch for these autobiographical responses and see what else we can learn as we go through line by line. Here's our beginning.
Yes. Hi, Laura. Come on in.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, I wanted to check with you about the status of the database project. It was my understanding that you were going to give the presentation in late March, and we needed to get the other manager's approval so that we could get rolling on this April 1st. And here we are, it's April 6th.
Okay, nothing at all wrong with that. It's just a summary of the situation. It lays out what the situation is that they're dealing with. Nothing really to talk about there. That's perfectly fine.
Yes, I know. Well, I'm really having some doubts about the direction of this project. I'm thinking maybe we need to examine that a little further.
Well, that's certainly a mistake on her part, right? Because as we know from watching the video, it's really late in the game for her to be saying that. It's a ridiculous statement. And the supervisor has every right to just feel like he wants to just go through the roof with frustration.
Well, what do you mean you're having doubts about the project? 2 months ago, you were completely on board with this. Why didn't you bring it up then, and why haven't you brought it up since then?
Okay, asking questions is, a perfectly wonderful thing to do. For the sake of this training, though, it's not what we want to be doing when we're trying to make the other person feel heard and understood. I hope you're beginning to understand the distinction. Many of these behaviors are perfectly fine, especially given a good tone of voice. They are perfectly fine at the right time, but not when you are trying to make the other person feel heard and understood and use this thing I call the reflective response. The question, well, what do you mean by that, is not reflecting back what she said. So we'll move on.
Well, I guess my concerns really aren't that significant. Things would have gone a lot smoother if John would have gotten me the data from his department. He kind of slowed me down.
Okay, we've already talked about her tendency to throw up an excuse for him to try to fix it, and then for her to skate away from it or dismiss it and then move on to a new excuse. It's just a little psychological trait she has. It's interesting. It makes the character interesting. Oh, by the way, this video is based on a real life person, but we've already talked about this trait that she has, so we'll move on.
Laura, if you've got problems like that, you need to come and bring them to me. When I was in your position, if somebody refused to cooperate with me, I wasted no time in getting my supervisor involved.
Okay. So we have two parts to his comment. The I expect you to come and talk to me. And the when I was at your level, here's what I did. So the first one, the I expect you to do such and such. Which one of the autobiographical responses would that be? Yes, I hope you said that it is advising. It's a form of advising when you say, I expect you to do such and such. Now, when he says, when I was at your level, I did blah, 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 that would be which one? Yes, telling our story. He's telling his story out of his autobiography. Okay, we'll move on.
Well, it's really not that big of a deal. And actually now I'm waiting on Anne to check everyone's schedules so we can pick a date.
Okay, we've already talked about her, so let's move on to how he responds.
Laura, what exactly did you say to Anne? I checked with her before I brought you in here. She said she's waiting on you for the list of attendees.
Okay, again, no reflecting going on here, and as you can tell, things are just going downhill.
Well, obviously there's been some confusion.
And there's kind of a dodge.
Laura, I don't understand what's going on here, but I am really disappointed by this. First, you tell me you've got doubts about the project. Then you throw John under the bus, and now you're putting all of this on to Anne. The date we established in your goals is past, and this is going to have a negative impact on your performance rating.
There he's summarizing the situation. He's obviously annoyed. That's not helping things either. So it's just a lot of summarizing, and things have become tense, and we'll just keep going.
And after everything I did for you to get you this position.
Which one was that of the autobiographical responses? Guilt trip, yes.
Now, I've noticed at times you seemed a little nervous. Do you think anxiety could have something to do with this?
Which autobiographical response? Probing question, yeah. If it's a question, it's probably probing. That's really the only one of the 6 that is a question.
Oh, actually,
look, we're all stressed. Your performance here is just not looking good. You need to get this presentation scheduled. I expect you to buckle down and get moving on it. You got me?
Definitely some advice, and not offered in a very nice way. And so we have this lousy ending. So rather than get into defensive arguments about who's right and who's worse and which one of these people is more messed up, how about if we just use our skills to work through the problem and create a collaborative atmosphere? So let's see if we can do that. And before we look at this newer video, the second version, let's remember this important lesson that comes out of this, which is you can't fix what you don't understand. And after that first conversation, he still has no clue as to what's going on with her. But like I said, let's see if we can create some collaboration. In order to do that, we're going to follow this model. Notice that we begin by reflecting. We use our reflective response. We watch for the green light, which says you now have the green light to switch to influencing the person. As soon as you encounter any kind of resistance, verbal, emotional, maybe you only see it with your eyes, but it's not expressed out loud. As soon as you encounter any kind of resistance, consider it a stop sign. Stop and go right back to reflecting. Now, I show the reflecting there as a horizontal line, but I will warn you, in many situations, it will feel to you like a downward slope, and you'll feel like you're all the way back to square one sometimes. It will be very frustrating. I just encourage you to stick with the process, keep your patience, keep your hope up, stick with the reflecting, and trust the process. This is powerful. So you're reflecting again, and that will allow you to overcome the resistance, just as salespeople are taught, just as counselors learn to do. And when you've been reflecting some more, you will get your green light back. And then you can go back to influencing. So that's the model that we will see him follow in this next version. And it's the model that we all really need to follow when we want to influence other people. Here we have the same beginning.
Yes. Hi, Laura. Come on in.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, I wanted to check with you about the status of the database project. You know, it was my understanding that you were going to give the presentation in late March. And you know we needed to get the other manager's approval so that we could get rolling on this April 1st. And here we are, it's April 6th.
Yes, I know. Well, I'm really having some doubts about the direction of this project. I'm thinking maybe we need to examine that a little further.
Okay, so we have the same beginning, not much to say there. Now, he has the first alarming thing that he hears. She's having these doubts. As I said before, he has every legitimate reason to just feel like he wants to go through the roof. So we sympathize with him. And now let's see him struggle to maintain his patience, control his emotional response, and simply reflect.
You're having some doubts.
Strong effort there at self-control, right? That's okay. He pulled it out. It was a bit of a struggle for him, but he managed to stick with the reflecting. And notice his accuracy check was built in because he put it in the form of a question. So now let's see how she responds. And I'll warn you, just because you start doing things the so-called right way doesn't mean the other person automatically does things the right way. So we need to be prepared for that. So let's move forward.
Well, I guess my concerns really aren't that significant.
She just does her dodging thing again and kind of minimizes the importance of her excuse. So let's see what he does with that.
You know, Laura, I value your opinions and I want to hear your concerns. Tell me more about these doubts that you're having.
So here he does two things that are not technically part of the reflective response, but they are wonderful. He affirms her. He tells her that he values her and her opinions, and then he invites her to tell him more information about the doubts. So he's not just reflecting, oh, I hear that you have some doubts. He's not just doing that. That would almost be a little too kindergartenish, right? To just use that kind of reflecting. So instead, he invites her, tell me more about these doubts you're having. So it's a bit of a reflection. He uses the word doubts, but he's inviting her to open up and tell more.
Well, the project idea is fine. It's not so much the project as it is my role.
Oh, so look at the result we got here. Because he affirmed her, he was gentle, his tone was good, he was caring, he was positive in his approach. She starts to open up a little bit. And as Stephen Covey, the author of Seven Habits that I referred to, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that I referred to in Module 1, he likened this to unpeeling, or peeling, I guess I should say, an onion. You know, you take off one layer, and then there's another layer, and then there's another layer, and then finally you get to the soft inner core, which is the part people do not want to have to share. Maybe it's too embarrassing. Maybe it's too upsetting. Maybe they're afraid they'll get emotional. Maybe they're afraid it'll be perceived negatively. Whatever, they want to hide that. So she's not to the soft inner core yet, but she's starting to take off those layers of the onion. So let's see what he does with that. Can he just reflect back what she has shared? She's saying there's something about her role that is giving her concern.
So your role in the project, you mean leading the project?
Okay. Notice here he started to reflect, and then he kind of interrupted himself and went to a question. And that's okay, because in real life, you don't just reflect. You do what feels right at the moment. So he's asking what I would call a clarifying question. Do you mean leading the project? And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's not, strictly speaking, the reflecting. I want you to understand that for the sake of this training and education, but it's still a very valuable, wonderful response.
It's not exactly leading the project. I guess I'm just a little nervous about giving the presentation.
Oh, we just took off another layer of the onion. And now we're starting to get some clue that this has to do with discomfort over giving the presentation. Notice that she is starting to feel more comfortable with telling what's really going on. Some of the defensive walls are coming down. And this is one of the great values of the reflective response. It takes down those defensive walls. Maybe not all instantly, but it can work to a miraculous degree. So she has given a more revealing answer. Let's see if he can reflect.
So leading the project is fine, but it's giving the presentation that's making you uncomfortable.
Beautiful reflection. Beautiful, beautiful job.
Right. I mean, it's just that I'm terrified of giving presentations in front of managers. I know I got through that presentation for our department, but I'm really not comfortable talking in front of all those managers.
Okay, so now the truth has come out, but I'll just let you know we're not to the soft inner core yet. That's coming. And let's see if he can just stick with the reflecting process.
Well, you know, we can fix that. We can get you scheduled into a Toastmasters group right away, and then you can even practice for me before you go out.
Which autobiographical response is that? Advising. He jumped in to fix too soon, and you can see by the look on her face, the timing is off. It's not time yet for that, and the suggestion is not well received. But that's okay, because in real life, we will make mistakes. So we're going to see him recuperate and recover from those mistakes, because that's part of real life. So first, let's hear her response.
Oh, no, you don't understand. Toastmasters isn't going to help. I can't do this.
And you'll notice I have it labeled panic up there. And so I think that's pretty accurate. And let's see if he can recuperate and recover from his mistake and do some reflecting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't realize you felt so strongly. I'm getting the feeling that you're getting kind of panicky about it.
Yes.
Okay. So start with an apology when you've made a mistake. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, whatever. That is always a wonderful thing to do. It helps repair some of the damage. Then he goes to the reflecting. I'm getting the sense that you're feeling kind of panicky. And notice her enthusiastic response. People love to be understood. And she's like, yes. So it is something that people hunger for, and they react very positively when you do this correctly. So let's see how she responds.
You don't realize what I've been through. I left my last position because I couldn't handle the presentations. I got so stressed, I passed out right in front of everyone. My heart was pounding so hard, I couldn't even breathe. Maybe I have some kind of phobia. I don't know. I just can't do this.
Okay, there's the soft inner core of the onion. And because he was able to apologize and then recover from his mistake and go right back to reflecting, she had enough trust in him that she was able to go to being even more vulnerable. And she went to that soft inner core. Can you imagine the embarrassment and humiliation of having to confess that she has had this situation in her background? It must be horrendously difficult for her to have to share this with him. And yet, reflecting with a caring tone of voice can work these kinds of miracles, getting people to collaborate with you, even when they don't realize they're collaborating. But what you're basically doing is collaborating on problem solving. And so this is just a very, very powerful skill that you want to be able to have no matter what your goal is. So let's see what happens.
Well, you don't want to have to live this way. And this is going to hurt your career. Maybe you should see a counselor.
And you can tell from my label at the top, this is another mistake. He's still advising too soon. And, you know, we can't be psychic. We can't always predict how the other person's going to react. Sometimes we only find out we did it too soon after the fact. And then we just have to recover. But we want to get better and better as we become more experienced with this. We want to become better and better at reading the nonverbals so that our timing becomes better and better and we don't make as many of these mistakes. And if we know up front that we shouldn't be making these mistakes and we should hold off and avoid these things as long as possible, avoid the advice, avoid the going to your own autobiographical story, avoid a probing question. If we know that we want to avoid these as long as possible until it seems safe to do one of those, then we are bound to have much better results. And then if we do accidentally miss time, our input, we can always recuperate the way we've seen this supervisor do so. So let's see her reaction to this second mistake of his.
A counselor? Counselors are for crazy people. I'm not crazy. I just have a little stage fright.
So a negative reaction, if you were in sales, you would certainly say you had some resistance here. Let's see what he can do because he's made another mistake. There's a negative reaction. He couldn't predict what she thought about counselors or this belief that she has. But now that he's come face to face with it, what's he going to do?
I see. So you feel that counselors only see people who are crazy.
Okay, that is a reflection. And I think he was within the realm of acceptable tone or personality style with that. There was a little bit of skepticism in there, but I think he kept it in check. I don't think that would be perceived as offensive. He managed to pull out the reflection. And here's a really great tip that comes out of this training. When you hear somebody say something that you think is really off the wall, as for example, with her belief that counselors are only for crazy people, rather than trying to argue with them, rejecting their belief, reacting negatively in any other way, trying to argue them out of it, which is maybe one of our most common strategies. We try to reason with somebody and argue them out of it and present facts and evidence. And there, again, will be a time for that. But if you go to that too soon, you just create more resistance. So he just did the reflection, and it's sort of like now the ball is in her court, to use an analogy. Or another way of saying that is now she has to hear her own words, her own beliefs spoken back to her And she has to ask herself, do I really believe that? Even though it just came out of my mouth, do I really believe that? Because many times we say things that, if we're trying to be more precise, we would admit, okay, I don't really believe that. Maybe retract what I said or clarify or be more precise in my statement. So this is one of the great ways in which this strategy helps to smooth things out for you, resolve conflict, allow people to come together, allow people to agree on whatever it is that's being discussed, rather than resisting, arguing, presenting evidence, debating, all of those kinds of things. Many times, a simple reflection like that allows the person to really reevaluate. And that's what happened here. So we will move on and see how this proceeds.
I mean, I guess I know people who aren't crazy that see counselors for like personal problems. I don't know. I've been trying to come up with a solution. I'm just stuck.
Okay. This is exactly what we were just talking about, and I've labeled it the power of temporary acceptance. He didn't fight her, he didn't debate with her, he just reflected back, and what I was describing, we just saw happen with her. She decided, I guess I'll abandon that position, because the more I think about it, the more I think, maybe that doesn't make sense after all. Not pinning them down and forcing them to abandon the position makes it more likely that they will. And that's a fantastic thing to know. So let's see what he does.
Well, I sense you really want to be free of this phobia, but you just haven't thought of an option that would work for you.
Beautiful reflection. Beautiful. She ended her comment by saying, I'm stuck. And he gave her that beautiful reflection.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions?
So, where are we? Now she's asking for advice. But here's another great tip that comes out of this training. Just because there's the initial question, don't necessarily bite the baited hook. In other words, test it out and see. And that's what he's going to do.
You're interested in my opinion?
And that was also a reflection, wasn't it? He turned it into a question, but he was reflecting that he perceived she was asking his opinion. And just the accuracy check was built in. It was a question. And let's see what happens, because watch out with this in real life. A lot of times people will kind of, again, skate away. So let's see.
Well, I really don't think anything's going to work.
So it just seems futile to you?
So once again, she does her little dodging thing. And this is actually quite common. Counselors, for example, are trained to be ready for this kind of constant dodging. Sometimes we call it the yeah, but. Yeah, but that won't work. Yeah, but, that kind of thing. So she does her dodging. And then he, rather than resist and try to say, oh, no, it'll work. We can do this. Rather than be sucked into that temptation, he just refuses to resist. I'm labeling it non-resistance, and keeps working the process.
Yeah. I mean, I can't keep living in terror like this. It's keeping me from even wanting to advance in the company. I know higher positions mean even more presentations.
So now we have what I've labeled her facing her options. And why does this happen? Because he's not resisting her, and she's having to look at her options, which are, I can stay miserable, or I can start to explore solutions. And he's not working harder than her, you might say. He's just working with her. So she's beginning to take some responsibility for her options. Let's see how this plays out.
So you feel like you don't want to keep living this way, and you know that it will hurt your chances for promotion.
Another beautiful reflection. He's just kind of walking alongside with her, working through this with her, reflecting. They are in a collaborative process. Let's keep going.
Right. So do you have any suggestions?
So again, she asks for suggestions, and you can tell from the way I've labeled the screen, now she's finally ready for advice. And he senses that, so he responds.
Well, I'd find some way to tackle that phobia. Maybe some stress management training can help. And with this presentation, how about if I present it with you? That way we could work it out and plan it so that you're more comfortable with the part that you have to do, and then you won't be the only one up there all the time.
Okay, so that's all making suggestions. And notice the other important strategy was asking, well, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that would help. Not being the only one up there would be huge.
Good. Well, let's look at some time tomorrow to get back together and iron this out. And in the meantime, maybe this afternoon you can call the EAP counseling line and get some appointments set and conquer this thing once and for all.
So look where we are now. Now he could get away with suggesting some counseling, although maybe a little different approach than what they had originally been talking about. But now they've collaborated, they're truly working together, and she's way more open to suggestions. And that's the whole point of this. So let's just look at the happy ending.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do that.
Great. I'll touch base with you in the morning to see how things went.
So there we have it. Which option do we like better? And yes, of course, this was done by actors, but this can easily be real life for you, beginning tonight, beginning tomorrow. It doesn't always have to be a skill that's used to iron out problems, to deal with conflict. As I mentioned, this can simply be used in social chit chat. It makes you a great conversationalist to simply reflect back what you're hearing and show interest and mix in questions, mix in encouraging comments or whatever, but it is a super valuable skill in any setting. Now, in the business world, sometimes people say, this reflecting thing, that takes too much time. Really, the wise response for that kind of concern is, how much time does it take to make up for a lost sale? How much time does it take to have to get rid of an employee and bring someone in to fill those shoes? How much time does it take to make up for confusion? This actually saves so much time and makes your day so much more enjoyable. Here's a question that some people ask. What if he or she doesn't want to talk? What if things have gotten so bad they just don't even want to talk? Well, then reflect that. I sense right now that you don't really want to talk. That's okay. I hope that sometime soon we can when you're ready. And then also, in the waiting time, while you're waiting, make other what I call deposits, emotional bank account type deposits, such as apologize for something that you need to apologize for, keep a promise, be generous, be kind, things like that. So we'll just review. Remember, you're going to reflect the message and the emotion. This is the model of influence that you will be following. You have two options. You can parrot or you can paraphrase. You always want to include some kind of accuracy check. You don't want to assume you've correctly interpreted, especially as things become more complicated or more intense. The accuracy check not only checks for accurate understanding, but it's also respectful because it communicates to the other person that you're working hard to understand and that you aren't jumping to conclusions about what they mean. You aren't making assumptions. You are just working to understand. Early on, we want to avoid the autobiographical responses. It's all a matter of timing, except guilt trips are really never a good idea. But theoretically, the other 5 all might have their place. And so here we are, mission possible. Should you decide to accept it, your mission is start reflecting immediately. If you're in a group with other people right now, you could start using this as you leave the room and walk down the hallway and start chit-chatting. You could use this tonight at home. You could use this day after day after day in every imaginable setting. Remember, if you need them, to use these prompts. It sounds like you're saying, so what you're saying is, or I sense that those are ways to get started if you need that. I know if you practice this and if you use it, you will be amazed at the kinds of results you can get. I am excited for you. I'm excited for what you can do with this. And please let me know how things are going. Remember that coaching is available if you want to map out more specific strategies for certain situations. Maybe you want an accountability partner. I'm happy to do that. I look forward to the progress that you're going to experience. So thank you very much. Please stay in touch, and I'll be doing the same.